Welcome to this meeting of the Overview Scrutiny Committee. It's an extra meeting that has been added to the calendar, and pleased to see so many people present this evening. Before we start the meeting, I will read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that the virtual meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this virtual meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. If members of the public do not wish to have their image captured, then they should ensure that their video setting is turned off throughout the meeting and set to audio only. And could you also please be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. And can I just remind members, if you possibly can, to use your blue hand to indicate if you wish to speak, but there will be officers and others looking out for any actual waving of hands to show likewise. Can we have apologies for absence, please?
Chairman, I've received apologies from Janet White.
Sorry, we can't hear.
Sorry, Vivian, we couldn't hear what you were saying there.
I've received apologies from Councillors Janet Whitehouse and Councillor Plummer.
Sorry, I'll just repeat that. That was apologies from Councillor Janet Whitehouse and Councillor Plummer. And then do we have any substitute members?
Yes, we have Councillor McCready for Councillor Whitehouse and Councillor Neville for Councillor Plummer.
So that's Councillor McCready substituting for Councillor Whitehouse and Councillor Neville substituting for Councillor Plummer. Thank you very much. Item 4, any declarations of interest? Councillor Murray?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Given the nature of item 5, I think I need to be overcautious and declare a non-prejudicial interest. I'm a member of the Epping Forest Heritage Trust, which is the successor organisation to the Epping Forest Centenary Trust and the Friends of Epping Forest, and I'm officially appointed ambassador for the Epping Forest Heritage Trust. I declare it, I think it's non-prejudicial, so I will stay in the meeting, take part in the debate, and as I'm a member of ONS, vote.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wixley?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My declaration of interest is almost identical to Councillor Murray's, but I'm just an ordinary member, so a member of the Epping Forest Heritage Trust, and in no way am I representing any views of the Epping Forest Heritage Trust. In fact, I don't even know if they have a view on this, but I am a member. I mentioned that really to demonstrate that I do have an interest in the forest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have any other? Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Really, just to say that I'm a non-executive director of Qualis. I think the interest is non-prejudicial and I will stay to the meeting.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other indications. So if we move on to item 5, which is the only item on the agenda this evening. Before I introduce the item, we do have obviously a number of officers present this evening, but I will also make reference to the fact that we have present 2 technical advisors to the council who work for ACORM, James Riley and Helen Venfield. And I also understand that we have a counsel employed by the council present, James Marici, I believe that's correct. So going on to item 5, this is the matter to be considered this evening. It's a call-in which has been received following the correct procedures that are adopted by this council, and relates to the adoption of Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation Interim Air Quality Mitigation Strategy. It's before this committee for review. Now, members, you do have on page 5 of your agenda the procedure which will follow this evening for the consideration of the call-in, and there are other papers attached to the agenda as well, which I'm sure you're all aware of. If I just quickly, looking at the process that we'll follow this evening, I'll be asking the lead signatory to the call-in to first of all describe their concerns, and then the portfolio holder will respond. The remaining signatories can then speak in support of the call-in. This evening we've got Councillor Caroline Pond, Councillor Simon Heap, Councillor Howard Kaufman, and also those on the committee who've signed the call-in, Councillor David Wixley and Councillor Stephen Neville. So each of those will have the opportunity to speak in support of the call-in, hopefully covering ground that has not been previously covered, but also, perhaps emphasising points that they want to clarify or to members of the committee. The portfolio holder will then have the opportunity to respond, and then as a committee we will debate the issues involved in this matter. Then as we draw that debate to an end, the lead signatory will have the opportunity to respond to the debate, and the portfolio holder shall also have that opportunity as well. And then we have got the various options before us, which are set out in H, either to confirm the decision, which may then be implemented immediately, to refer the decision back to the decision taker for further consideration, setting out in writing the nature of its concerns, or to refer the matter to full council in the event that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee considers the decision contrary to the policy framework of the council. So say those are set out on page 5 of your agenda. So I will now look at, sorry, I'm seeing Councillor Bedford. Do you wish to say something at this point, Councillor Bedford?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like a point of clarification, please, because I was informed earlier in the week that up to 4 members of the call-in people could ask questions. It's not every member of the call-in team. So it would be I think if Mr Woodall could just clarify that, please.
We did discuss this at the briefing meeting, but I will pass it on to Mr Woodhall to give you a response.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bedford, I think you're talking about point C on the procedure, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In normal circumstances, we would only have a maximum of 5 signatories to a call-in, but we do have 7 this time. It's entirely up to the chairman. I think it's at the chairman's discretion.
The discussion that we had at the sorry, somebody indicated that they would.
I will withdraw from that bit of it.
So, Councillor Caroline Pond, you don't wish to take part in that item on the at C. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So,
and Councillor Plummer isn't here.
That is very true. Yes. So that, in fact, does bring us down to 4 names. Oh, yes, Councillor Wixley and Councillor Stephen Neville. Yes.
I think Councillor Wixley has his hand up.
Sorry, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted a further point of clarification on this, because if you're a signature to the calling procedure and also a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, surely you get right to speak in one or other of those. attachments.
We did have that discussion as well, Councillor Wixley, and felt that if those of you who are sitting on the committee had that opportunity to speak in support of the call-in at that time, it would allow the portfolio holder to respond to all of the points that have been made by those signatories. And I think the portfolio holder is indicating that that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Okay. So if we can then move on, I can't see any other body indicating they wish to say anything. No. So if I can ask Councillor Chris Pond to describe your concerns and the reason for bringing this call into overview and scrutiny. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chairman, obedient to your request, I'm going to go through points in skeleton form, and other members of the call-in team may amplify or speak on some of them as they feel right. The first point I want to make is on what you might call prematurity. At the informal meeting, Councillor Bedford said there were 140-ish outstanding planning applications. Now, I don't know, he may know, I don't, Nigel Richardson may know, but assuming that each of those 140 planning applications represented 5 dwellings, and some may only represent 1, others may represent 100. That would be 700 extra dwellings, which could be authorised under the last part of the decision, which is treating the current decision as a material fact in determining planning applications. Of course, that is up to members of each individual planning committee as to how material they think this would be. But that would mean 700 extra dwellings, each with 1.5 extra cars per dwelling on average, which would mean over 1,000 extra vehicles, all within 4 miles of the special area of conservation. Can EFDC really say 1,000 extra vehicles will not have a detrimental effect on the special area of conservation through its air quality? Or perhaps Councillor Bedford is saying they will have a beneficial effect. But I think any impartial observer, and of course the most important impartial observer of this in due course will be the inspector, that they will not have a detrimental effect now. EFDC cannot rely on something which may or may not happen 4 or 5 years down the line, because a jam tomorrow is not a recognised facet of planning law. Secondly, air quality is a total concept, and as well as the oxides of nitrogen and ammonia and ozone, it includes particulates, especially from old diesel engine vehicles, whose deposit, which is an oily, sooty film on foliage, and also, Madam Chairman, on your lungs, is an important factor. And no cognizance has been taken in the report of particulate deposition and pollution in all the research. Thirdly, the imposition of a charge to drive through the forest is not in the FDC's gift. It may or may not be feasible to issue a clean air zone anyhow. It might require the active encouragement of the Highway Authority. It might indeed require a private act, Parliament, to establish a CAZ. And no cognizance has been taken of the likely public opposition to a CAZ in the work. You cannot just say we will rely on the future imposition of a clean air zone, because you may find a very large proportion of the inhabitants of this district are entirely against it. The decision taken at Cabinet in July is relevant here. This was on the basis of a paper marked throughout working draft only, and with numerous references throughout its text to be decided later. This will emerge in due course, or yet to be considered. Now, I, with my colleagues, did consider calling in the Cabinet decision in July, but our advice was that it would be premature to call it in at that point, because we would only be told by Nigel Bedford and his advisors that this is something which will be discussed in due course. And this is, you are querying points which have not yet been established. We expected further consultations before the decision was brought out at 3:55 on a Friday afternoon shortly before Christmas, but we had none and we saw none. So either the clean air zone is deliverable within EFDC's powers, or it is mere window dressing, which EFDC have neither power nor inclination to introduce. In the case of A, they are hoodwinking the public. And in the case of B, they are deluding the inspector, the conservators, and Natural England, arguably. So this was the first occasion on which we could reasonably call in this decision, and we proceeded to do so without further ado by the deadline. Now, as to the view of the Conservatives, I have checked with the Conservatives, and they tell me it remains premature because of the possible adverse effect on the SAC, because the mechanisms, and I quote them, for the delivery of the CAZ are not embedded in the local plan policies DM2 and DM22. And our point, I think, is that what is proposed might well be a mitigation. It might or it might not be a mitigation, and it might or might not be within the FDC's power to introduce it. But it cannot be assumed at the moment that it would be deliverable, and therefore it is quite improper that planning decisions should be predicated on something which is so loose. Now, I don't know whether the inspector would consider this interim strategy to be sufficient. Natural England say quite clearly in their letter that it might be a viable way forward if embedded in the local plan, but it hasn't been embedded in the local plan. The inspector has been communicated with because the portfolio holder says a copy of the strategy was sent to her. It's also been sent to her by other parties with possibly slightly different gloss. Now, if it is there in the CAZ, it's in place and it's fully examined and independently moderated in the process of including the main modifications within the local plan, then I, for one, would not resist it. But we have not had that done. We have not discussed the practical difficulties of instituting a charging system. We have not got public acquiescence in the introduction of a clean air zone, which might mean that the average inhabitant of Claydon Boys has to pay £12.50 to visit Waltham Abbey. We have not had that. So there is so much imponderable in this decision that we think it requires to be challenged in the strongest possible terms, and that is why we have proceeded to this meeting. Now, in the course of the discussion just before Christmas on the next planning application in Waltham Abbey, we were told that the London Borough of Waltham Forest had objected to that planning application because and they complained and had their objection registered because of the extra burden that it would place on roads in their borough. Now, this would probably happen in the case of this clean air zone, because people would simply divert their vehicles to avoid paying the charge, just as they do in the London congestion charge, through streets elsewhere, not altogether necessarily within Epping Forest administrative area. And therefore, on the basis of their objection to the next planning application, they would, in all probability, I think, object to this policy. So, Madam Chairman, that's all I'm going to say at the moment, but I will ask other colleagues if they wish to speak to this, and they may have particular areas of the objection they wish to speak to on which I have not elaborated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pond. If I take the other signatories in the order in which they are listed on the call-in document, if I can first of all go to Councillor Wixley, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Had a bit of trouble unmuting then. Yes, I think Councillor Pond has mentioned quite a few things that I want to mention, but he's probably used slightly different words. I think this is unfortunate that it's come about this way, because I've sort of been involved with this local plan, I think, since the beginning. I've attended virtually all the workshops and briefings, and I think if ever a document warranted a briefing for all members to attend, it would be this particular document which is before us tonight. I've read through it. It's actually quite an interesting read. Not very often you can say that about council documents, but I feel a lot of it is actually quite interesting, and there's some interesting ideas there. But one thing which is of concern to me, if I go into a specific point, is that it's an issue I raised at the Cabinet meeting on the 20th of July. In fact, Councillor Janet Whitehouse also raised it, and it's regarding the retrofitting of charging points for electric vehicles. And when I say retrofitting, I'm referring to where there's an established house which doesn't have provision for off-street parking and therefore not off-street charging, because that is a matter which I've been approached about by a constituent of mine who wished to buy an electric vehicle but didn't have anywhere convenient to charge it. Now, there's very little information about that in this report. If you go back to the minutes of the Cabinet meeting of the 20th of July last year, there is reference to a future report on this. I can remember Alison Blom Cooper referring to that, and it's in the minutes, which states that there will be a future report on this coming to the Cabinet. So I'm a bit disappointed that this issue of retrofitting of charging points, it doesn't go into greater detail in this draft mitigation policy, especially as this is the final draft. So had we had a briefing, like I would suggest would have been desirable, then those were the sort of points which we could have brought up. There are numerous other ones, but I won't go into all of them. But when I read through a document, I go through it and I mark things which are interesting. I can tell you now there are a lot of pencil marks on that interim strategy report. So that is my regret. So I do think there's a case for having a briefing on this, and if that means going back to a full council meeting, then obviously I'm in support of the call-in. So I think that's all I can say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wixley. If I can then go on to Councillor Neville.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to focus in on the clean air zone, on the matter of the clean air zone. It is not for EFDC to decide. As a central part of our mitigation strategy, it would require being explicitly, in my view, put into the local plan through, and for the inspector to agree to it. It could be done through main modifications. She has yet to agree to the local plan, and to this for that matter, and we don't know that she will. It could be that she decides it's not robust enough, as we have pointed out. It would also strategically need to be consented to by the government, and not very many charging clean air zones, which is the main proposal here, have been consented to by the residents of those areas and therefore by the government so far. Yet the strategy also mentions particulates in passing, very in passing. No granular work has been done on this, and this is a glaring omission. Particulates are very harmful to plant life and human life. It is something I've raised at this council before. What research has been done on this, if any? What monitoring has been done of this? I'm deeply concerned that the council gets this strategy right. I'm deeply concerned for the quality of life of all Epping Forest residents and their health and well-being, as we should all be. We do not think this is robust enough, and as yet, it will actually be effective for what it is trying to do, which is why we followed the procedure of the Constitution of the Council to call this in. There was an opportunity for ground to be made, and it hasn't been taken so far. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Neville. And if I can now go to Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I do have a few things that I need to say before I get into the meat of the report. And the first one is we were charged by calling this in of delaying building projects. And I think that's unfair to make that charge because we're acting within the EFDC constitution. And the initial press release was wholly biased and postulated the view that the cabinet was the council and that others were trying to stop the residents getting their wishes fulfilled. This was not our choice. This was the choice of the portfolio holder. Now, at the informal meeting regarding this call-in, the portfolio holder said that council had consulted council, and I requested to view the advice given. This has been refused. The council has not given permission for the advice to be shared, which is odd, because there cannot be any commercial interests involved. If the strategy is to be accepted, then all permissions will be given. If it is not, then it makes no difference. So any claims made on this advice can be dismissed. At least we should be able to know what was asked and of whom. And it seems clear that to say yes to this strategy in order to release permissions for larger developments, smaller extensions and alterations are not affected. So that claim is wrong too. It will risk big problems later. To wit, some developers may start when this strategy kicks in 2024, and then should the inspector make changes, resolving under or over payments become tricky. Now, of course, the Cabinet could request that, say, £3,000 per unit is lodged in escrow waiting for the final decision, and then both parties could agree the divvy up at a future point. The sums mentioned in this report are woefully short of a sensible amount given the impact the traffic will have on the SAC. So when we get to the report, we have to know what was asked to be included and how was it phrased, because there are things missing. Particulate matter from tyre and road degradation. There is no mention of either issue in this report. There is conflicting information and analysis on the impact of tyre degradation on receptors, but the residue is more dense than water and will sink to the bottom of any open water near the roads. The consequence of this has not yet been resolved. And then we get to brake dust, which is more of a problem, because at least 50% of the particulate problem in our country, it comes from brake pads. Brake pads are either asbestos-based, no longer used in mass-produced vehicles, non-asbestos organic, and semi-metallic. The metal in these ones accounts for 65% of the pad. In ordinary cars, high-performance vehicles have steel and copper threads as well. And 50% of that dust becomes airborne where it settles. And I've sent everybody, just about everybody in the committee, a picture of what happens and how it is ingested into the body. And at this point, the smaller end of the particulates are PM 2.5. And this is exactly the same size as where the alveoli swap oxygen for carbon dioxide in the human body. This is really, really dangerous stuff. And a simple illustration of this is that diesel burns as a ball. The outside of the ball burns, and what's left, the residue, is soot. And as engines become cleverer and cleverer and cleverer, and they burn more of the diesel, the particulates are smaller. So it's now down to PM2.5, which is very hard to measure. One of the things that does get a mention on page 38 of the agenda, which is page 26 of the report, is ozone. And this is a surprise because ozone is always produced by burning fossil fuels. Hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides react with sunlight to produce ozone. And it's the basis of the photochemical smog that is often around. And a series of secondary pollutants can be caused by more reactions in stronger sunlight. So the report doesn't show what the ozone level is in winter or in summer or anywhere in between, and it will be worse in the summer. Now, the World Health Organization recommends no more than 30 parts per billion of ozone, with a maximum of 50 parts per billion, 80 parts per billion any 1 hour. And there are various things. 50 parts per billion headaches occur, up to 280 parts per billion chest pains occur. We have no idea what these are. And we're encouraging cyclists to use these roads, but we have no idea of what the ozone level is, which is at best irresponsible. In the report, it says that 2% of the road fleet is HGVs, which purports to be not very much, but each HGV and each 38-ton HGV causes 17,000 cars worth of damage, and that degrades the road and causes more pollutant, particularly particulates. And then we get to the clean air zone. Now, if I understand, and I'm willing to be corrected by the sensible people you have there, the Transport Act 2000, Section 163, a CAZ can only be set up by the charging authority, which would be a county council or unitary authority. Further, a clean air zone can only be implemented, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, after a consultation and provided it appears desirable for the purpose of directly or indirectly facilitating the achievements of policies in the charging authority's local transport plan, which would be Essex. And currently the Essex Transport Plan of 2011 does not include a clean air zone. And they're also supporting Basildon at this moment, resisting a clean air zone suggested by central government. So it's unlikely they're going to be for this. And then we have the projected cost of it, 2.5 million. The one in Birmingham is projected to cost 50 million. In Bath, it's 23 million with 40 automatic number recognition points. We might have 30, say. We don't have any idea what the charge will be for the people who live within the clean air zone to have their car in it and indeed move it. Will it be reduced? And then we have the slight worry, because there have been rumblings of us merging into a unitary authority with Uttlesford, Harlow and Brentwood in 2024, and this strategy is not due to be implemented until 2024. There is a bit of a tie-up there. So ultimately, I think we've had insufficient time to digest this report, and yet we are pressed to accept it by the same team that presented the local plan submission version, which came with equivocal written legal information, but when it was presented in the chamber was totally unequivocal. 3 years and 60 modifications later, we do not have an accepted plan. And this is more likely the reason for planning delays, and not a request to scrutinise a hefty document that has enormous ramifications, both legally and for the health of the residents. I'm done.
Right, thank you, Councillor Heap. And then finally, if I can go to Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief because a lot of what has been said has my obvious support. This issue is so fundamental to the health and well-being of our residents. It's a matter of great gravity, actually, and it's also fundamental to the health and the well-being of the forest, which is 90% of our district. One of the main reasons for living here is we live close to the forest, and I don't want to be dramatic, but the forest is massively suffering through pollution. But I do feel this issue, which has got great gravity to it, should have been dealt with in a more transparent and collegiate manner by those involved. It's very late in the day, coming up last few days to Christmas with all that's been going on, to land this upon us without any debate. I'm shocked that the council has had legal advice that collectively the residents have paid for, that the elected councillors who have asked to see it are not allowed to see it. And that's a worry. I don't know what that advice says. I don't know how sound the basis of the decision that's being put forward to us is, because I haven't seen the legal advice. That's really unusual. It seems that the solution to our problem is to bring in some sort of clean air zone, I think in 23 or 24. But it seems that we don't have the ability legally to bring in a clear zone under our own steam. So the solution is a problem to the problem that is something that we actually cannot seem to bring about. And it's a little bit the cart before the horse, because we've worked so hard collectively to get a local plan, get our shoulder behind the wheel. We're close on the local plan, massive amount of work, hours of workshops and effort from very good councillors. We've had a couple of goes. The inspector's knocked us back. The inspector would have an opinion, I'm sure she will, on the implementation of a solution, a clean air zone, that we can't bring in. And I would think the majority of our residents will actually not want us to have a clean air zone. They won't want to be charged for driving to Epping £12.50 or however it's going to work. So our solution is based upon things that our residents won't want and that we can't bring in. So I'm saying it should be a matter for full council and urgent. I'm not seeking to delay, urgent further debate. We have to reach a solution. But without the legal advice, we've had our own legal advice that brings into question what the council is proposing. But I support Councillor Pond. He's very eloquent with how he's presented this. And if I could leave it there, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kaufman. And now if I can turn to the portfolio holder to respond to the comments and the call in itself, Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, there's an awful lot of concerns that have been raised there by fellow councillors this evening. A couple of things I'd just like to address. Now, I'm actually going to turn over to Alison, who has the more technical expertise. But the first thing I'd just like to raise is that Councillor Pond talked about 700 outstanding applications. I can confirm this evening that I've spoken to Councillor Mr. Nigel Richardson, and it appears that there are 372 outstanding developments from 143 applications which are in abeyance. And not all of those are going to be approved because they're going to be reviewed, which will be subject to further scrutiny before they're actually finally approved. The other things that I just wanted to say is I've noticed that you've mentioned that it's not in our gift about the CAS. We have to start somewhere. Where did the Mayor of London start? We have to propose something that we think will mitigate the effects on the forest. And that has to be a good starting point if it's in our plan. Don't forget, this has been looked at by Natural England, that are looking at our project going forward, believing that this is a sort of a solution to the Holleran judgment, which was also raised by Councillor Pond. And it's a way of actually looking at all the habitats and the regulations, making an assessment of everything that lives in the forest. I'm sure that at some point this evening, we will get further clarification on that Holleran judgment, which to me, I believe, was actually carried out in Ireland, but does refer to European sites. I think at this point, there's not a lot more I can say because most of you have raised various points that need to be addressed specifically by a technical team. And therefore, I'm going to pass this over to Alison, who can allocate out and deal with the points raised this evening. And I thank you for taking the time to put together constructive criticism. I do feel, though, that you are anti-development in some respects. You do not want development to go ahead. And also, I feel I do support Councillor Kaufman that it's fundamental to the health and the residents of Epping Forest. And that is exactly why this assessment has been carried out. So without further ado, I will pass over to Alison, who can now start to address some of the points that have been raised this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford. I've tried to make a note of all the comments, and I will try and make sure that we address all of them. But if I miss some out, please come back and we will of course try and address as far as possible. I will take you through the process in terms of the planning and habitat regulations aspects that we've been involved in from council, and then I will pass over to colleagues at ACOM to deal with the more technical matters about the particulates that were raised particularly by Councillor Heap. And the legal points, we do have James Marici here, so if we need to address any of those, I'll pass over to him, particularly in respect of the disclosure of his previous advice to us. As members have already indicated, this was the air pollution mitigation strategy was reported to Cabinet in July. And Cabinet in July delegated to the portfolio holder the decision to sign off the final version of the strategy. So that's what we were seeking to do by way of the portfolio holder report. The letter from Natural England of the 10th of December did advise us that this was a sound strategy for the purpose of avoiding and mitigating air quality impacts on the forest that result from plan-led developments. And I say that advisedly because that's the development that we've modelled for the purposes of the strategy, is the quantum of development that's proposed for allocation in the emerging local plan. And just to be clear, we have remodelled since the hearings in August in 2019 to ensure that what we have now modelled is what is going forward as part of the main modifications. So it does take into account the changes to the local plan that the inspector requested. So it's that reduced level and quantum that has been modelled for the purposes of developing the mitigation strategy. And that includes an allowance for windfall development as set out in the local plan. However, having said that, each planning application, as Councillor Bedford has already indicated, when submitted, must be subject to a project level habitat regulations assessment to assess if there is a potential impact on the forest. And obviously those sites which are not proposed for allocation in the plan aren't windfall sites or vary significantly in terms of the type of the development or quantum of development, so that they will result in additional traffic movements through the forest, will have to go through a process which was set out in Appendix 2 to the portfolio holder report. I don't believe that's been copied into your papers tonight, but that sets out a very clear process for assessment, and the council has put in place a transport planner in the team to do the initial assessment, and then if necessary for that to go through a process whereby our transport consultants and air quality consultants will review the applications to make an assessment and to identify whether there's any additional traffic movements which require additional mitigation. It's interesting, just going back to the letter from Natural England, they have previously made it very clear that we need to adopt the mitigation strategy prior to the finalisation of the local plan, and that we shouldn't be waiting for the adoption of the local plan. And they've also indicated that whilst the policy wording should make a clear link between the mitigation strategy, it does not identify the specific measures in the mitigation strategy, because that would need to change over time. If you look at page 47 of the papers that were sent to you, you will see that the mitigation measures framework for delivery on page 47 sets out a whole series of measures that will be part of the mitigation strategy package, that we are not simply relying on the clean air zone. Indeed, the introduction of the clean air zone has been modelled from 2025, not before. And what we are seeking is a reduction in vehicular movements through the forest, and to be achieved by a 10% conversion of petrol cars to ultra low emission vehicles by 2024-25. And there's a whole package of measures to that end. In terms of the clean air zone, we are we have set out again, if you look on page 48, a timetable and the actions that will be required for the implementation of the clean air zone. We fully recognise that there's a whole process that we need to go through to bring in a potential clean air zone, and that's why it's proposed for commencement and has been modelled for commencement in 2025. That sets out a whole series of measures that will be taken starting from the beginning of this year and taking us through to any implementation. And that will include a significant monitoring and analysis of the latest evidence base and any further considerations. It will be completed in conjunction with Natural England. And there are, if you look at page 45, you will see what the process is and the governance arrangements for starting to put in place any implementation of a clean air zone. So that deals with that matter. I'm just trying to look at my notes to see what other matters there would be. The Conservatives and Natural England have been involved in ongoing discussions about the potential air pollution mitigation strategy since the July 2020 cabinet decision. We have met with Natural England on 4 occasions, and the Conservatives have also been provided the opportunity and indeed attended the last meeting that we had with them in November, and it's been through a considerable scrutiny in terms of finalising the strategy that went before the portfolio holder for his signature. Any provided considerable comments at various stages, and those have all been addressed to the extent that they are satisfied that we can conclude beyond reasonable certainty that it will address the issues in relation to the impact of air quality from growth in the district. In terms of the particulate matters questions, that is of a technical nature. So I'm going to ask James Riley, who I believe is on the call somewhere, if he could come in and address that matter. James, are you
yes,
with
I am.
us? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening. I am Dr. James Riley of AECOM. I'm a technical director in the ecology department and supervised the technical work that underlies the mitigation strategy, the modelling and the interpretive work, and the liaison with Natural England. Also on the meeting is my colleague Dr. Helen Benfield, one of our air quality scientists who worked with me on the project, and she may have some things to add once I've spoken. Obviously, one doesn't want to get into a huge amount of technical detail, but I think it is useful just to clarify a few points with regard to particulates and ozone. And I think there was in the paper that was submitted, though it hasn't been mentioned verbally in this meeting, there was a reference to boilers from domestic heating and things like that, and their relevance. So first thing is that in terms of Epping Forest is designated as a special area of conservation for its woodland and its heathland and its population of stag beetle. Now, in terms of impacts of air quality related impacts from development on those particular types of receptors, particularly the vegetation receptors, ammonia, oxides of nitrogen, and resulting from them nitrogen deposition are by far and away the most potentially damaging impacts. And that's why the focus, Natural England's focus, the Corporation of London focus, and our focus has been very much on that. And that is well established. The UK Air Pollution Information System, set up by the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, has ample, massive amounts of information with regard to nitrogen deposition, ammonia and NOx impacts on vegetation, and particularly on woodland, which picks up a great deal of nitrogen. Particulates, and particulates mean a range of things, but in the discussion they were mentioned to PM2.5 and PM10. Those particularly small sizes of particles, 2.5 microns, 10 microns, are less relevant to vegetation, or indeed stag beetle, than they are to human health. They are primarily human health issues, which is of course not what we are addressing in this very specific situation here, this mitigation strategy and the impact assessment and habitat regulations assessment. In terms of, they primarily affect mucous membranes, which slag beetles don't have. Beetles don't have any mucous membranes at all. In terms of the vegetation and habitats, dust is mainly of relevance when it's the larger fractions that will result in extensive soiling of the vegetation, which can occlude photosynthesis and interfere with stomatal performance. Now, that is entirely possible and indeed is routinely assessed on construction sites and construction haul roads and construction traffic, and where you have very friable substrates, very dusty substrates that are being manipulated and moved around. It's not really an issue with metalled roads, which is what we're talking about here. And therefore, it is very much a much smaller consideration for protecting Epping Forest SAC than nitrogen deposition. It is a very significant issue for human health, but that is not what we're talking about here. Ozone was the other thing that was mentioned. There was mention to ozone, again, very significant for human health. Again, in terms of impacts on Epping Forest SAC and impacts on vegetation, it is much less significant than nitrogen deposition and it's the pollutants that contribute towards it, partly because, or largely because, you actually get higher ozone concentrations in rural areas than you do in urban areas. The reason for that is because the spare oxygen atom, which would go to form ozone, is used to form NOx close to roads through that chemical process, which is the source of nitrogen deposition. So the elevated NOx very close to roads means you get lower oxygen, lower ozone, I beg your pardon. So again, the focus is very much on ammonia and NOx as toxic chemicals in themselves, and then the resulting nitrogen deposition from them. And the focus on traffic, going back to the point that was raised about boilers and other sources of combustion from a housing development or a conventional employment development, is that we know from the UK Air Pollution Information System that fully 40% of the nitrogen that is deposited on Epping Forest SAC within the 5 kilometre grid square in which the SAC is situated comes from two sources. It comes from traffic and it comes from agriculture. Agriculture is also a huge source of nitrogen, livestock and fertiliser. It's roughly evenly divided between those two, and those are by far the two largest sources. Close to the roads, our modelling indicates that traffic alone contributes as much as half of all the nitrogen deposited at Epping Forest SAC. So that is why there is a very clear link between traffic and nitrogen deposition and the adverse effects of nitrogen deposition and the desirability to control traffic impacts. So if you're looking to control the adverse effects via NOx, ammonia and nitrogen deposition of a conventional housing and employment development, in other words, something without a significant stack, like an energy from waste facility, which is obviously not a local plan allocation type of development, then your focus is very much on traffic, and it is very much on NOx, ammonia, and the resulting nitrogen deposition there. So while discussions of particulates and discussions of PM10 and PM2.5 are relevant to human health, they are perhaps a bit of a distraction in the very specific context that we are talking about this evening. And in terms of going back to the point about nitrogen deposition, so I mentioned that close to the road, traffic is responsible for more than half, or roughly half, of all the nitrogen that's deposited on the SAC. In contrast, across the SAC as a whole, within the 5 kilometre grid square within which the SAC is situated, industrial, commercial and domestic combustion boilers, things like that, are responsible for about 8% of the nitrogen. And that's the existing stock. So obviously additional boilers from the kind of housing and employment we're talking about here is a relatively negligible source compared to traffic, which is the big source. So that is why the plan has the focus that it does. Dr. Venfield, Helen, if you're on the call, do you have anything else you want to add? If you don't, by all means, then I'm more than happy to hand back to Ms. Von Cooper.
Hello. Yes, it's Dr. Helen Benfield from AECOM, Principal Air Quality Scientist. Thanks, James. I think you've covered most of it. The one thing that I would like to add is that a clean air zone aims to increase the number of cleaner vehicles into the fleet using the roads, and as well as reducing NOx, which we've modelled, it would also reduce particulate matter. So the measures would also add to that reduction.
Thanks, Helen. I realised there was a couple of points that I didn't pick up. Councillor Wixley's point about the additional guidance on retrofitting electric vehicle charging points. That is something that's going to be picked up in sustainability guidance, which is currently in preparation and will be subject of a future report to Cabinet. As you know, we've already been out to consultation on sustainability guidance for major and minor developments, and the third document in the suite of guidance is for the retrofitting and smaller scale development, and that will be coming to Cabinet in due course. I can't remember who, I think it was Councillor Heap, referred to the London Borough of Waltham Forest and the reply on the Dowding Way application. And I've just read through that, and basically they were saying that we should consult with Natural England prior to making a decision. I can assure you we have consulted with Natural England on that application, and they have said that if we as competent authority are satisfied that the mitigation package of measures is appropriate, and part of that obviously is contained within the air pollution mitigation strategy, but they have the applicants have also put together a package, a whole suite of other measures as well, which were reported to members at District Development Management Committee. In addition to that, we have, and James Riley and Helen Venfield have been part of modelling specifically the impact of traffic on the forest from there, and the proposed introduction of the right-hand turn ban onto forest side. So we have certainly taken those matters into account. I hope I've covered everything, but if I haven't, let me know and I'll try and do my best.
Thank you, all of you who've contributed to that part of the information gathering. Councillor Bedford, do you just want to add anything else before I go to members?
My final point is, I think Alison might have just missed it, would be that Natural England obviously appointed their own air quality specialist at great expense to Natural England to actually check paperwork that we were submitting. And they did make a couple of suggestions which were in their final papers, and they've withdrawn their objection to the air quality mitigation strategy. Therefore, if the way that I see it at the moment, we've had two experts this evening that have gone through everything that was appertaining to that and how we reached that decision for the air quality mitigation strategy, plus it's been checked by Natural England. So that's all I wish to say at this stage, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bedford. So if I can now go to members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee themselves to open the debate this evening. Any issues?
Carry on.
Sorry, can I just, yes, if I can just finish this bit. Sorry, I've just lost my thread. Yes, to raise any issues that they wish to bring forward themselves, any questions that they would like to ask. I'm not sure who that was who just spoke just now.
It was me, Councillor Jennings.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
It was just to alert you to the fact that 3 members wish to speak, Councillors Rackham, Sunga and Dorrell.
Thank you very much. Does that mean you now have access to your hand system?
I am fully working, yes, thank you. Can I add Councillor Murray to that list? So it's Rackham, Sunga, Dorrell and Murray.
Thank you very much for that. So if I can go to Councillor Rackham first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually very pleased that we're discussing this very important issue tonight. It's a big one and it will affect our residents, but I think it's something that we do need to look into deeply and to implement. I would just like to say a little bit more on clean air zones, because a lot of boroughs, especially London boroughs, now have implemented schemes. And there may be some people that don't like it, and there may be some people that do like it. But the thing is, this is the future. This is what we are probably looking at within 10 years. So I think, you know, as I said, there will be people that like it. There will be people that won't like it, but this will come to us at some point, I'm sure. I wanted to follow on Councillor Wixley's point, because this is something that does concern me. Obviously, we are going to house build. That's another thing we're going to do more of in the future. But I am quite concerned about electric points and where we're going to put them, how we're going to implement them, if we're going to work with any other bodies to implement them, like electric companies, for instance, and how we're going to go about this, because we will have electric cars. Again, it's something else that's coming down the line until we decide that we may want to use hydrogen or whatever else. But I would like to know if we are going to be working with anyone and how we're going to implement these, and also costs. I'd be interested to know how much it's going to cost us as a district council going forward to bring these points into our daily lives, and how our residents can use them. So if you could answer those points, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rackham. I mean, from what I understood of the comments made by Alison Blom-Cooper, it sounds as if this is something that's going to be coming to us in another document. But Alison, could you just cover those points?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. We will be looking at that as part of the guidance, sustainability guidance that will be coming to Cabinet in the future. In the meantime, we do have a policy in the plan, and we are seeking to ensure that there are electric vehicle charging points in any new development coming forward where there is parking provision made. There is also government grants and guidance that's kind of coming out around electric vehicle charging points, and we will be looking into that and pursuing those, particularly through our Sustainable Transport Officer, who will be picking those issues up, and also the Climate Change Officer. So we have a team of people who are starting to put that package together.
Thank you very much for that. So obviously, Councillor Rackham, that is something that we will be looking at in greater detail in the coming months. Councillor Sunga?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Okay, so I've had a lot of time to digest this particular report, and that's been put here. Naturally, we're going to be concerned about the effects of the pollution, etc. And Councillor Heap made some valid points then, Councillor Kaufman as well. And I'm very pleased to note that independent advice has been sought, and the scientific reports have been looked at very carefully by Dr. James Riley and Dr. Venfield as well for ACOM. Obviously, they've taken this matter very seriously, and I'm pleased to note that they've actually said, they're very happy with the fact that we should be looking to adopt the report. Natural England have also added that they've also said in page 9 of the report that we should consider adopting this report as well. So I think adequate consultation has been taking place. Scientific evidence is also being talked about today from ACOM. All reasonable steps have been taken. The interim air pollution the mitigation strategy addresses all these issues. So I'm really finding it difficult why this has been called in the first place. I think that this should go back. My recommendation will be that it goes back to the Cabinet portfolio holder, and that's my position on it at the moment. And in terms of, I think it addresses it. We've got everything that we need to know. Natural England have said it, that we should adopt it. The scientific, the evidence is there as well. So yeah, I think it should go back to the Cabinet portfolio holder, and I think we should seriously rejecting this call-in. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I am on mute. Never mind me. Thank you, Councillor Sunga, for those comments. I take it that you're suggesting small on HI to confirm the decision, which may then be implemented immediately. Can I just confirm that was what you did mean by those comments?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Thank you. If I can now go to Councillor Dorrell.
Thank you, Chairman. So As chairman of Plans West, I know how much hardship this impasse has caused on local developers. So I welcomed it at council last couple of weeks ago that we actually had an agreement with Natural England, because they have been difficult customers, and it's good that we have an agreement, any agreement. However, there is at least one point raised by the call-in that I agree with, and that is the pressing need for a meaningful consultation. At no point has this sort of arrangement been presented to the electorate, not an election, no sort of consultation, and I think it's very important that we do so rather than just impose it on them. And back in July at Cabinet, I raised concerns about both the clean air zone and some of the other environmental proposals that were in that document. And I still think it's slightly odd that, you know, we are Epping Forest District Council and we want to stop people travelling within the district. That does not make sense to me. EFDC now is in the position where it is recommending a HGV depot 400 yards from the forest, and then once that's operational, charging Waltham Abbey residents to drive up the hill behind it. I mean, that's just incoherent. I don't understand that at all. So on the other side, I'm not quite sure what it is that the call-in group are seeking to achieve out of this. I understand that they'd like it to go up to council to be debated, but beyond that, what are they suggesting? Because it feels the whole local plan thing feels like a game of snakes and ladders, and we keep hitting the snake at 99 and going all the way down to the bottom again. And I'm struggling to see what it is that they would propose as an alternative to going forward with this, if it were a fact that this is going to be consulted on correctly at some point in the future. Can we just not treat what we have as an interim as a going concern? So therefore, I have questions for both the portfolio holder and the call-in people. So to the portfolio holder, what level of consultation is being proposed for the clean air zone? How is that going to take shape, and how are people actually going to feed in and respond to that? And to the callers in, what's your desired outcome from this process? Let's say we get it up to council, let's say you win the argument. What would you like to see come out of this? Because at the moment, I'm on the edge. I'm not entirely sure what it is that we're seeking to do with this call-in. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dorrell. Councillor Bedford, do you wish to answer the question around the...
Yeah, just in short, in answer to Councillor Dorrell's thing, if you turn to page 48 about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the ninth one down actually says there will be a consultation on the final scheme, which runs from January 2024 to March 2024. So there will be consultation, and it will be going out to residents. I dare say some residents will object to it. I fully appreciate that. And the thing is, we have to have a process in place. It's been well scoped out, and this is the timetable as laid out on page 48. So, Councillor Dorrell, I hope that answers your question. I run a rather thirsty, dirty vehicle, and I know at some point I will have to change for the future. So I appreciate what people are saying about the clean air zone. I appreciate also that change isn't going to happen overnight. I think we already noticed that there's been an increase in electric vehicles within the district, and I believe the figure is somewhere between 8 and 10% of vehicles are already changing over to better fuel economy and better, cleaner vehicles. That's only going to get better with the government legislation that's being brought in, and hopefully people will see that in the future going forward. I think also the government have worked strongly. A quarter of the pollution that's been mentioned tonight actually comes from gas boilers, and the government have worked extremely hard to ban gas boilers from 2025. So new boilers, obviously, when houses are built then, have got to change the way that they heat their homes. It may not have an impact on the forest because it's that far away from the forest. However, it is the government picking up the directive that there needs to be change, and change is being implemented at the highest level. So I hope that that's answered your question. It's quite a difficult one, but there is a clear strategy and a timetable as laid out on that page 48. Thank you.
Chairman, could I just add to that if you look at Appendix 2, it sets out the process for the implementation of the CAS, and you'll see that there is consultation and engagement with communities and stakeholders at a number of key stages of developing the proposals, and not just the consultation stage that Councillor Bedford referred to, which will be the final stage of consultation.
Thank you very much, both of you, for those comments. Councillor Pond, would you like to respond to the question that was put to you?
Yes, I could give a very clear answer to Councillor Dorrell, whose contribution in the District Development Committee on the next site was, I thought, very inspired. What are we seeking? We're seeking a removal of the clause in the portfolio holder decision, which states that in a recognition of this possible future strategy, there should be a removal of the releases of prohibition on removal of the releases of planning permission. Because as Councillor Bedford said just now, change won't happen overnight. He's dead right, it won't happen overnight. But of course, if you release those planning permissions, change will happen overnight, and it is jumping the gun, pure and simple.
Thank you for that. And if I now go to Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have got a number of points to make, I'm afraid, but this is a major issue, so I think you would expect members of the committee to have a number of points. If I start off with the 3 points that I think there probably will be common agreement on, because I've seen some things on this council over the years, and I have to say there's a lot of points about how this has been dealt with that I'm deeply unhappy with, but I'll look at that in the second part of my contribution. So the 3 positive points is that I'm really glad that we've learned from the call-in fiasco of the Epping Forest College Covenants, that if you remember, Chairman, I felt so angry about that I just withdrew from the meeting because I really was really angry. So I'm really glad that on this agenda item we had the full explanation of the procedure that was going to be followed. You explained it clearly at the start of the meeting, and you are following it. So that's to be welcomed. I think that's benefited all members, and it's a very clear procedure, and it's the one that we always used to have. So I'm glad that we've learned that lesson from the debacle, in my opinion, of the other calling. I think we all understand the importance of the SAC. I mean, if you look at page 14 in the introduction, it explains why Epping Forest is a special area of conservation, and we love our forest. That's why people want to, one of the reasons why people want to live in Epping Forest. And if we don't get this right, we will do permanent damage, continued damage to our forest. And it's not just any old sack. It's regarded as one of the most important in the whole of Western Europe. I'm sure other members on this committee know that. You talk to anyone who's really knowledgeable about the forest, and I don't claim to be one of those. I just love it and listen to the experts. It's not any old sack. It's regarded, because of particularly of the forest, it's regarded as one of the most significant in the whole of Western Europe. And one fact always remains with me. We've got more ancient trees in our Epping Forest, and ancient trees have a precise definition in terms of how many years they've been around. We've got more ancient trees in Epping Forest than they have in the whole of France. So we're talking about something that's really significant. And I think we would all agree, whatever we want to do with the call-in, I think thirdly, we would all agree, or I hope we would all agree, that the reasons given for the call-in and the detailed contributions that were made by the people who signed the call-in were really excellent. And it simply isn't true to say, as our Member of Parliament said, it's just a last minute undermining of the situation by some local councillors. That's what the press release said. Last minute undermining of the situation by some local councillors. So whatever you think we should do about the call-in tonight, I think if everyone was being honest with themselves, this isn't clearly not a last minute undermining of the situation. The points have been put very detailed, very professionally, very knowledgeably. So those are the points that I hope, as I say, regardless of what members want to do with the call-in, we kind of all agree. But I do just want to focus a little bit about the portfolio holder's reaction and the Cabinet's reaction to the call-in. And I can do that as an objective member of ONS who didn't sign the call-in. I probably would have done if I'd been asked, but I don't have a problem about not being asked. I do want to remind members that it's a proper part of our constitution. It's a proper part of our constitution that members can call in portfolio holder decisions. In that way, it's the final part of the decision-making process. Obviously, it's not done on all portfolio holder decisions. Of course it isn't. But it's only done when members feel that there's a real need. And I think that has been demonstrated. And I was really pleased, Madam Chairman, that you your introduction tonight, and I wrote down your words. Correct procedures have been adopted in this call-in. It's part of our constitution. And for there to be a press release issued, and this is to do with members, I'm not criticising any officers here. Can I make that absolutely clear? There is no criticism in my comments about officers. It's about the Cabinet. For there to be a press release issued on the 24th of December, and again, I've got that in front of me because Loughton Town Council received it and it was circulated to all town councillors after Christmas by our clerk, but I saw it on Christmas Eve because I responded immediately to the media department. For there to be a press release issued that was so partisan, where members were being criticised for using a council procedure within the constitution, and we actually even had the leader of council saying, "Not a good Christmas, disappointing local people." I've got the press release in front of me. Not acceptable. And to compound that, and I've checked today, I'm now told that the archive press release that is on our website, so I regard it as the archive press release, is different from the one that was issued on the 24th of December. It's been changed to make it more within what I would regard normal protocols of an EFDC press release. So I am really, really unhappy with that. And it did get picked up. Everything Epping Forest picked it up. Our town clerk picked it up. And I think I'm making a valid point. It should never, a press release of that nature should never have been released. Cabinet members should not be publicly criticising other members of council using a due process that is open to us. We can't be members of the Cabinet, and I understand that. There wasn't consultation about this draft strategy with members. Councillor Sunga mentioned all the groups and all the people that were consulted, but other members of this council needed to be consulted. That's how the overview and scrutiny and cabinet model works, particularly on something as important as this. So we're excluded from the cabinet. There wasn't a proper consultation. And as Councillor Ponder said, all the other drafts that we saw before contain things such as it's a draft. This needs to be considered. So it's not acceptable. A call-in is the only mechanism that members have for this discussion. And I think we can say that we've all benefited from this discussion about this important document and strategy, but it wouldn't have taken place if there wasn't a call in. And then finally, one other point that's arisen from tonight. I am concerned to hear that there is legal advice that certainly at least the lead call-in hasn't been allowed to see. I'm not saying he's made that request, but obviously Councillor Heap has made that request. And I cannot understand that. Yes, on a confidential basis, but we all accept that we keep confidential basis on Part 2 items. So I'm not happy with that either, that there is confidential advice or legal advice going to certain members of council that are then denied on a Part 2 basis to other members of council. Not acceptable. And then finally, and I'm not going to go off the deep end because I would like to give the opportunity to the portfolio holder to explain exactly what he meant. But Councillor Pond has told me, who was at the meeting, what he thinks it means. We've got the notes of the meeting where the call-in people and the portfolio holder meet to try and amicably sort it out before the call-in fully proceeds. And it's on the very last page of the agenda, page 54, paragraph 7. I can only read that as the portfolio holder, I don't want to call it a threat, let's just call it a statement. He was asking whether the LRA and the Green Party could be liable for costs of any impact of delay caused by this call-in. That's how I read that. And if that's the case, again, to me, I just find that completely unacceptable. The 2 Green members and the LRA members that signed the call-in have just used correct council procedure. So there's no way that the member of cabinet, in my view, should be asking or seeking in any way, shape or form that they then are liable for any costs that meet the council. If I've misinterpreted that paragraph of the meeting or record of the meeting, Councillor Bedford, I apologise in advance. But Councillor Chris Pond was certainly of the view that was what was meant. So, very important issue. Members, we do need an opportunity to debate this fully at council, but I focus mainly my concerns because of the level of expertise in the earlier contributions on the procedure. And there's a whole number of procedural matters here that I think are of deep concern, and I've not seen anything quite so disturbing in a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Murray. I will go to Councillor Bedford if you wish to respond to any of those questions, comments.
Well, only in as much as, yes, my concern was at the time that I was being told that you'd sought the LRA and Greens had sought legal advice, and it was looking to me that it was actually that we were going to need legal advice because the whole thing was going to be taken to JR. And I was concerned that if it goes to JR, would we be able to claim if we won our case, because our case is actually being backed up by our legal representation who agrees that we have a sound case going forward. If we go forward with the case and we will win our case, are we able to claim costs against the LRA, not for the delay, but the court costs of us having to employ a barrister to counterclaim against what we were told were you've got legal representation. So it's slightly different to the wording that's there, Councillor Murray. But I agree that you would take that the way that you have, but that is the way that I interpreted it on the night that we had the informal calling.
Thank you for that. I don't know whether anybody wants to take up there have been a couple of people who have made reference to the council's legal advice. I just wonder whether anybody would like to respond to that and where we are on that basis. Alison?
I think it would be appropriate for James Marici to come in at this point.
James?
Yes, hello. Good evening. My name's James Marici, Queen's Counsel, and I've been instructed by the council to provide legal advice over the last, I think it's year or so. And I've provided advice on a number of occasions, I think both in writing and orally, in relation to air quality and habitats issues, covering the local plan and the engagement that the council's had with Natural England. I think the advice issue, I know it's been raised a number of times this evening, I think, with all respect, is a bit of a distraction because I was asked to consider whether, given the points that have been raised in the call-in, whether it was necessary for this advice to be disclosed, having regard to the timing of my advice, the content of it, and the extent to which it relates to the issues that have been raised. And my view was that it wasn't necessary for that advice to be provided in the context of this particular call-in. Obviously, I'm not proposing to say anything more about the content of that because we're in open session and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to do so. But it's I think that's probably as much as I would want to say about that at the moment. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, James, for that. I would just say that I did raise this question myself with officers when we were having discussions around this particular meeting and the item on it. I'm not sure that we have any other.
We have Councillor Rackham still has her hand raised, but if she no longer wishes to speak, Councillor Holly Whitbread has indicated she'd like to speak.
Right. Councillor Rackham, did you wish to come back?
No, thank you, I'm fine.
Right, thank you very much. Can I just check that there are no other members of the committee itself who wish to speak before I go to Councillor Holly Whitbread? I'm not seeing any indication of that. So,
Councillor Heap has put his hand up again, Chairman.
Again, as somebody who is not part of the committee himself, I'll take him after Councillor Holly Whitbread. So, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and Happy New Year, everyone. And it was good to be here this evening and listen to the debate. Why this couldn't be done in July, I don't quite understand. And for many, Councillor Pond certainly was the Grinch who stole Christmas, because actually so many local businesses and local people have been negatively affected by the Natural England situation. And actually with the hard work of Nigel Bedford and Dame Eleanor Lang in the background, and obviously the efforts of the officers, we really had got somewhere. And I know a collective sigh of relief was breathed by many developers in our area, small developers actually, who many of which have had their livelihoods extremely damaged in really difficult times. So I was so disappointed to see this call in, particularly at this stage when it could have been done 6 months earlier. I get a lot of the discussion that's been had tonight, and I think it's important we had it. But as I said, this could have been had so much earlier. I hope that members of Overview and Scrutiny tonight would have listened to the council's officers and Councillor Nigel Bedford and agree that it's time that we move forward with this and allow these developments to be released and go ahead, and that we allow small businesses to be supported as we should be. I get there needs to be more debate moving forward and consultation about any air mitigation strategy, but this is outlined and set out in the report. So I hope that members can support this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Whitbread. And if I can now go to Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the scientific report. Yes, I understand the very narrow focus, but this is a very narrow focus, and that's going to have an impact on everybody else who lives around it. So we've got to consider these things in total. We can't just say that's our focus and sod everybody else, because it will be literally sod everybody else. And then we have, as Councillor Whitbread just said, why couldn't this be done in July? Well, because in July, all that was mentioned about the clean air zone was sometime before maybe 2033. So there was nothing to actually debate. This is the first time there's been something tangible to talk about, and it's undercooked, I'm afraid. And if you do give permissions based on this, well, it could lead to problems. So we can, yes, by all means, I can't stop it. Obviously, we can't stop it as the people who've called it in. But we do think that the scientific evidence is a little bit undercooked because it doesn't mention ozone, which is a problem for people, and people will cycle and walk through the forest. And it's bad for plants. The nicotine plant is particularly susceptible to ozone. So by all means, give it the go-ahead, but you can't do it unknowingly from this point on.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. And I'm now looking at Councillor John Phillip and Councillor Chris Whitbread. So, Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, this is a piece of work that we've been working at for a long time. There's two things we have to remember about it. Firstly, it's not inextricable from the local plan, but it's not clearly just because of the local plan. Members need to remember that it was the impact on the special area conservation that caused Natural England in the first place to give us a direction to stop issuing planning permissions for new builds, full stop, whether that be a single additional building or multiple additional buildings. So we need to make sure that we separate it from the two of them. Clearly, to give it its full force, it needs to be referenced as part of the local plan, and the need for it was called out by the inspector to go beyond, to get to the point where there's no reasonable scientific doubt, as determined by Natural England. That's where we got to with the inspection in public. That's why the officers have been working at this for so long. It is key that we're actually able to start allowing some of the development that has been granted planning permission already, subject to this going forward. As was already pointed out, these will all be reassessed as a result of the strategy and brought back where appropriate to committee for approval, as we have done already with some coming through DDMC. The idea of stopping all new development in the district until such time as we have an adopted local plan, I'm sorry, ignores both the economic realities of what we need to do in our district, but also the provision of new accommodation for our residents. What we do need to do, wrap into that, of course, is that those developments so far approved by this council, subject to the air qualification, do still count against our numbers for the local plan. So it's all tied into what Alison was talking about in terms of the modelling. It's something that we need to be able to do. We need to move forward. This has dragged on for sufficiently long, far too long. And I remember members from all parties asking me when I was the portfolio holder about when we might actually be able to reopen the development gates in the district. This gives us the opportunity to do it, and I would encourage the committee to allow us to move forward and actually support our local builders in this time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. And Councillor Chris Whitbread.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Chairman, very well said there by Councillor Phillip and Councillor Bedford before him and Councillor Holly Whitbread. This has been going on for an awful long time. Members could have chosen to call this in back in July. There was a mitigation strategy then for consideration, a draft mitigation strategy. They didn't do so. So if they're saying now they haven't been consulted on, then they've left it too late. Too late. And by doing this now, they are just damaging our small companies and residents in a time of the COVID crisis and the recovery period that we need to see new builders moving forward. We've already heard from Councillor Pond when we had the constructive answer to Councillor Durrell from Councillor Bedford. All we heard from Councillor Pond was his strategy was, by doing this call-in, he hoped to stop any of the planning applications currently stuck in the pipeline from coming forward. I find that absolutely disgraceful. I would ask members to support that this call-in doesn't go any further and that we can get on and start releasing these planning applications. Absolutely disgraceful.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Whitbread. Councillor Jennings, I can't see anybody else. Have you got anybody that you see wishing to speak?
Not that I can see, Chairman.
Thank you very much. In that case, if I can go back to the lead signatory, Councillor Chris Pond, if you wish to respond to the debate. Thank you.
Yes, well, these are a few winding up points. Madam Chairman, I am not a Conservative basher. I have a good deal of admiration, or I did till a few moments ago, for the leader of council, particularly during the COVID emergency. I think he's given very good leadership. But I ask members of the ONS committee to concentrate on scrutiny. And from everything we have heard tonight, this is a document with large holes in it. Because it is half-baked and half-ready, because you would be granting release of planning permissions on the basis of something which might or might not happen in the future. And most of the speakers tonight have doubted whether a clean air zone could be adopted in exactly the way that is envisaged in the document. We are really considering here the well-being of the forest. The forest was here before we were born, and it will be here when we're 6 feet under. Let us deliver it to future generations unimpaired, and with its edges in particular left to delight the towns, forest towns and villages which have been built up. Almost, and in my case, just over the road from the main area of the SAC. Now, if the forest edge has been given no consideration whatsoever. Now, Dr. Riley refers to 5 kilometre squares. Dr. Pond refers in particular to the forest edges, and no consideration has been given as part of this strategy as to whether propinquity to the forest is going to be a determining factor, which I think it must be. If I want to, I may relate to one particular allocated site. It's already been built out, and so therefore I can have no material effect on whether or not planning permission should be granted or released. That is the Royal Oaks site in Smarts Lane in Loughton. And at that point, the development has been completed. It's rather a nice development. If I wanted to downsize, I wouldn't mind buying a flat there. But it is exactly opposite the forest. And the damage that is made to the forest at that point by vehicles spewing out exhausts, noxious gases, particulates, the oily deposit on the trees, the domestic boilers, and the delivery vehicles has to be seen to be believed. We should not be looking at Epping Forest as a whole, whether in 5 kilometre squares or otherwise, because the damage to the environs of the forest will be the greater, to the edges of the forest. Now, I haven't, as part of the mitigation strategy, the council have not looked at deleting allocated sites, which would particularly damage the forest. The one I've just referred to can't be deleted, so that's a fait accompli. But we should not allow any more of them. The fleet mix has been, it will change, but it may not change in the way or to the timetable which is laid out in the document. The delay which I have engendered, which the leader of the council calls disgraceful, in fact I think he called it disgraceful 3 times, is very minimal because of course the building firms do not work over Christmas, the general building holiday. And the delay which would be engendered by waiting until the expedited major matters can be incorporated and the timetable for the clean air zone enshrined in the local plan would also be minimal. It would be a couple of months more if the council got on with it. So for those reasons, I think the air quality is a concept as a whole. It is something we must concentrate on as a whole, but with particular reference to where the forest is most vulnerable, adjacent to residential streets and adjacent to the main arteries. And for those reasons, Madam Chairman, I think people who are members of the Scrutiny Committee, They are, of course, loyal Tories, and they want to support their man. But for the reasons that I've stated, it is premature to support your man. Get these documents enshrined in the local plan, as has been stated by the Conservatives, has been stated by Natural England. A few more months to wait, and you will have a sound local plan, because there's much that's good in the mitigation strategy. But to rush it through now, it's that I feel disgraceful. And if I could just reply to the points made by Councillor Murray about the press release, I have to say I do agree with him. But there again, I thought it had been drafted by President Trump. So I think we have to be very clear in issuing press releases on behalf of the council. You are not issuing them in behalf of the portfolio holder, the leader, or any other cabinet colleague. You are doing so on behalf of the councillor, and you lead with due political impartiality to reflect all thoughts. I think, Madam Chairman, under your tutelage, this has been a good debate. A lot of items have been addressed, which otherwise would not have been addressed. As far as Councillor Holly Whitbread's concerned, she probably wasn't in the meeting when I stated the reasons we did not call it in the summer, which of course we could have done. How can you call in a document which is peppered with phrases like "this is yet to be decided," "this is a working draft only," etc., etc.? We would have been rightly criticised had we called it in at that point. So, Madam Chairman, the point I want to leave you with is, please, on this decision, refer it to full council, where we can have a considerable extra debate. All members with representation near the forest can contribute, and you will have aired the subject thoroughly. Public consultation would have begun well, and the only thing you would lost is a few months, weeks or months, on release of the planning application. And I do not consider that disgraceful, because on the whole, my sympathies are not with developers. They are with the trees and the precious integrity of the special area of conservation. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pond. And if I can now turn to Councillor Bedford to respond to the debate as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, having listened to the expert advice given tonight, I hope that this committee will acknowledge that we've had a good debate and we've listened to the advice. In view of the discussions and the timetable and the progress we've made in getting Natural England to agree to withdraw their objection, I see no reason why the Council can now not move forward. And I would ask this committee to support item 8H1 in small brackets. I know an awful lot of work has gone into this. I know that we have the backing. We have Natural England who have withdrawn their objections. I know that we've worked extremely hard with the Conservatives of Epping Forest. Also, the Conservatives of Epping Forest are split into two camps as well. There are those that are the Conservatives that actually want to protect the forest to the utmost, and there are those that actually want to commercialise parts of the forest. And I think this strategy that we've got tonight, going forward, is the right approach. We cannot cover all bases, but we can only do our best. There is a set timetable which needs to be followed. There is nothing more that we can do at this stage. And by actually referring this to full council, we're just adding more delay, imploring more hardship on local builders. We do need to start releasing these buildings that have been built. That we need to move on. We cannot keep going, as was referred to earlier on the snakes and ladders symbol. We get to the top and someone knocks us back to the bottom. I beg this committee and I ask this committee, move this policy on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bedford. Thank you for those comments. Can I also thank everybody who's participated this evening in the debate? I think we have had a wide-ranging debate and an opportunity to perhaps learn more about what we have before us as a document this evening. A lot of detail has been added verbally to what we might have read in the various papers that we've had before us. We now come to the point where...
Excuse me, Chairman. Councillor Murray wishes to say something.
I don't wish to say something. Well, I do. It's process. I'm wanting to move that we refer it to full council, Madam Chairman. I mean, I've said what I want to say, but you presumably need a proposal from a member of ONS to move forward. So I want to propose reference to full council, please.
Thank you very much. That was actually going to be my next move forward. And I was going to...
Sorry, Chairman. Natalie Boateng has indicated she wishes to speak. You may wish to take this now.
That might well be to cover what I was going to ask.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just advise the committee that you can only refer this decision to full council if it's contrary to the council's policy or budgetary framework, and I don't believe that applies in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you for that advice, Natalie. And Councillor Murray, you've obviously heard that. Do you accept that is...
Of course I do, but I do then want to just ask a question, because it obviously depends on what's going to be moved by someone else. Is there a mechanism for me to have my vote recorded at ONS? I can't remember.
I think the way the procedure is at the moment, all votes are being taken individually anyway, but I will just check how that is.
No, I meant recorded in the minutes, Madam Chairman.
Yes, I realise, yes. Can I just ask perhaps Gary Woodhall the procedure on that?
Chairman, we can record Councillor Murray's vote in the minute if he so wishes.
Thank you very much.
As you probably intimated, we're doing a roll call vote anyway, so we will have a note of it, so that'll be fine.
Thank you. The advice I was going to ask was, we're now left, I think, with small one, Roman 1, Roman 2. Do I have any proposal from a member of the committee?
I'm sorry, Chairman. Councillor Sunga now wishes to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Sunga.
Thank you, Chair. I think I may have already said this, but I'd like to propose that we reject this call-in and it gets referred back to the portfolio holder. Thank you.
So can I just clarify again with you? Are you proposing Roman 1?
Sorry, I'm actually asking for this call-in.
Yeah, no. On page 5 of the agenda, it sets out that if I read it through, that you're proposing to confirm the decision, which may then be implemented immediately, and that would be by the portfolio holder.
Correct.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Burrows.
Yes, I will second that.
Thank you very much. So on that proposal, if we can then go to a vote, and as Mr. Woodall has indicated, this has to be done via a call through of members. Vivian, are you doing that?
Yes, I will be, Chairman.
Thank you.
All right. Chairman, do you want to be taken last with the Vice Chairman?
Yes, please.
Right. Councillor Baldwin.
Yep, against.
Councillor Bolton.
I support that proposal.
Councillor Burrows.
I support the proposal.
Councillor Durrell.
Councillor Durrell abstains.
Councillor Hadley.
Councillor Hadley supports the proposal.
Councillor Heather.
Councillor Heather for.
Councillor Lee.
Councillor Lee abstains.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Neville.
Against.
Councillor Rackham. Councillor Rackham.
For.
Councillor Stalker.
I support the proposal.
Councillor Stocker.
For. I support the motion.
Councillor Sunger.
Yeah, so for.
Councillor McCready.
Against.
Councillor Whitsley.
Against.
Councillor Jennings.
Abstain.
Councillor Sartin.
Abstain.
Excuse me, Vivian, can I just mention something? I think you called out Councillor Stocker's name and Councillor Sunger answered.
Oh, sorry then. Councillor Stocker. Councillor Stocker.
Councillor Stocker.
I'm happy to stand in for him.
Councillor, it's not working. Councillor Stocker abstain.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, my iPad's playing up terrible.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. The result is 7 in support, 5 against, and 5 abstentions.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, that was 7 for the motion, 5 against the motion, and 5 abstentions. So
that's correct.
On that basis, then the motion to confirm the decision and for it to be implemented immediately is agreed. Can I once again say thank you very much to everybody who has participated. It has been an interesting debate. It's something that we don't have very often in this format, but I hope that everybody agrees that we did have a good hearing of the subject. I know not everybody will be happy with the outcome of the decision, but equally we have been seen to talk it through very carefully to get a lot of information, and going forward we will see more and hear more about various aspects of the sustainability policy that is going to be coming forward, and also the work that will be being done around the electric car points, which will be a means of encouraging more people to change over to that form of transport. Yeah. So thank you all very much again, and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.